They say I was born into promise, into light, into a world where brilliance was expected, not earned. But no one tells you that brilliance is a burden, one you drag behind you like a golden corpse. My name is Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald, and I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota in the fall of 1896. I was named after my distant relative, the man who wrote The Star-Spangled Banner. That fact seemed to carry more weight than my actual birth, a legacy before I had lived a day. My father was a quiet Southern man, elegant in failure. He had charm, manners, and no money. My mother was Irish, devout, ambitious, and constantly reminded me that her father's fortune was what kept our heads above water. I grew up between those two poles, one of collapsed dignity and one of restless striving. Neither side taught me how to survive, only how to look good while falling apart. I was a sensitive boy, obsessed with stories, language, and theater. While other children played baseball, I was writing plays and forcing the neighborhood kids to perform them. I wasn't popular, I was clever. There's a difference. And cleverness, when wielded without grace, breeds resentment. At Princeton, I thought I'd become a legend. I arrived with my hair slicked back, heart pounding, ready to conquer the East Coast aristocracy. I joined clubs, wrote for the Triangle Club, chased prestige like it was oxygen. But my grades collapsed under the weight of my ambition, and the war, that brutal European mess, came calling. I left college to join the army. I thought war would make a man of me. It didn't, but it gave me time to write. That's when I started This Side of Paradise. The novel poured out of me, a bitter, sparkling reflection of youth, money, and the empty chase for identity. I sent it off to Scribner's with nothing but desperation and gin in my blood. It was accepted, published, praised, and overnight I became famous. Not just known, famous. The kind of fame that kisses you hard and then slaps you drunk. I was 24, I was beautiful, I was dangerous to myself and irresistible to others. I drank too much, I spoke too sharply, but I was writing. God, I was writing. And then there was Zelda. Zelda Sayre. Wild Alabama thunder in a flapper's skin. She was everything I wanted. Untamed, vivid, cruel in the way only the young can be. We danced, we drank, we lived like our bones were on fire. She was the first American flapper, they said. She was also my muse, and my mirror, and my downfall. We married in 1920, after my book made enough noise for her to believe in me. We moved to New York, then to Paris, then to wherever the party was loudest. Our daughter Scotty was born into a glittering hellscape of champagne and regret. We weren't parents, we were performers. And during that madness, I wrote The Great Gatsby. I thought Gatsby would define me, not in the way Paradise made me famous, but in the way something eternal marks a soul. I sculpted each sentence, each word, like marble. I bled for that book. I loved Jay Gatsby, a man who built himself out of smoke and dreams, only to be destroyed by the lie he worshipped. The novel didn't sell. Reviews were lukewarm. America, it seemed, wasn't ready to see its own reflection. I was devastated. I believed I had failed, and so I drank. More than before. I started waking up in strange places. Friends stopped answering. Zelda's laughter became a blade. She began to unravel, slowly at first, then completely. By 1930, she was institutionalized. Schizophrenia, they said. I visited her in clinics, read her strange, beautiful stories, and tried to hold on to the girl I met at the Montgomery Country Club. But she was gone, or I was. I needed money. So I sold stories to magazines, the Saturday Evening Post, Esquire, quick, slick pieces that paid for the bills and the booze. I called it whoring with words. It was writing, but not creation. I was bleeding for rent, and the critics turned. They said I was washed up, a has-been, a one-trick pony drunk on past glory. I wanted to scream that I had more to say, but even I wasn't sure if I believed it. So I left. New York. Zelda, the wreckage of what we had been. I went west. Hollywood in the 30s was a circus of bright teeth and empty promises. I became a screenwriter. It paid better than fiction, but it paid in soul too. I sat in offices with men who wore smiles like masks and talked about character arcs like grocery lists. I drank between takes, sometimes during. There were affairs, whispers, a woman named Sheilah, who saw the ruin in me and tried to build something tender on top of it. But I was already too fractured. Every touch felt like memory, every kiss a ghost. And all the while, Gatsby slept in its dust jacket, unread. But I wasn't done. They say the West is where dreams go to die, and they're right. But they forget that dreams scream before they fade. I arrived in Hollywood not to chase glory, but to outrun failure. I had nothing left in New York but unpaid bills, bottles in the trash, and the echo of Zelda's screams behind clinic doors. My reputation was in shambles. The critics had moved on. The literary world had turned its back. But Los Angeles didn't care. It didn't care who you were, only what you could sell. So I sold myself. Word by word, scene by scene. I became a screenwriter. Not the glamorous kind. I wasn't shaking hands with Clark Gable or directing epics. I was in rooms with dead air, rewriting dialogue, fixing third acts, giving soul to cardboard characters. The studios didn't want art. They wanted structure, timing, conflict, resolution. I gave them all three. I was quick, efficient, invisible. I worked on 3 comrades, among others. They paid me, sometimes well, sometimes late, but they never paid in dignity. My name rarely appeared on screen. My voice was buried beneath producers' notes and second unit edits. It wasn't writing, it was survival. And I was drinking. Still, always. More discreetly now, less publicly. I knew the danger, knew I was killing myself. But sobriety was a ghost that visited only when the money ran out. In 1937, I met Sheilah Graham, a British-born columnist, elegant, sharp, warm in ways Zelda had never been. She was different. She listened. She cared. She gave me a reason to get out of bed. I lived with her. I tried for a while to be better. I slowed the drinking, I walked, I wrote, I tried. But guilt is a slow poison, and regret is heavier than any bottle. Zelda was still in Highland Hospital. Our daughter Scotty was away at school, living a life I watched from the margins. I wrote her letters, bright, funny, apologetic. I wanted to be a father. I wanted to be something other than a shadow. So I began again. I started a novel, The Last Tycoon. I poured what was left of me into it. Monroe Starr was my final avatar, a man of control, surrounded by chaos, haunted by the death of his wife, trying to build meaning from an industry that devoured meaning for breakfast. I wrote in bursts, between headaches and fits of despair. I knew time was running out. My health was declining. My heart fluttered like a tired bird. I ignored it. I had ignored everything else, but not the work. Never the work. I wanted The Last Tycoon to be my resurrection, my redemption, my final proof that I was not a relic, that I still had teeth, that the flame hadn't died, only flickered. But the pages came slower than before. My sentences, once sharp as glass, dulled with fatigue. My hands trembled, my vision blurred. Still I wrote. I wrote as if death had a deadline. Then came December. On the 21st of December, 1940, I collapsed in Sheilah's apartment in Los Angeles. A heart attack, sudden, unforgiving. I was 44 years old. I didn't die in a mansion. I didn't die surrounded by books. I died in a borrowed apartment with unfinished pages on the desk and silence in my lungs. At the time of my death, The Great Gatsby was out of print, no tributes, no grand headlines, a few obituaries in the back pages. They called me a faded star, a tragedy, a reminder of the jazz age that had died long before I did. Some mourned, most moved on. They buried me in Rockville, Maryland, next to Zelda, whose life would end just 8 years later in a fire that consumed the hospital where she slept. A blaze in the walls, like the fire that always lived in her. They found her in the ashes of her locked room. She had always deserved better. It should have ended there. But something strange happened after I died. The war ended, and with it came a generation searching for meaning. Young men, home from Europe, cracked open my books, and found themselves inside. Students read Gatsby and saw the futility of dreams, the danger of illusion. Teachers assigned it. Critics reevaluated it. I became the chronicler of the American dream. Funny, isn't it? I had written it as a warning, not a celebration. Gatsby was never a hero. He was a ghost chasing a green light that never existed. But the country needed myth, and I had given them one. My name returned, not just to bookstores, but to culture. I became canon, standard, essential, and all of it happened without me. I never saw the applause, never signed the new editions, never gave the interviews or received the honorary degrees. But that's the price sometimes for telling the truth too early. Fame returned, but I remained dead. And yet, I live. In every classroom that assigns Gatsby, in every party that ends in silence, in every dreamer who believes that reinvention can save them, in every writer who drowns their doubts in gin and tries to make something beautiful anyway. I was not a perfect man. I hurt people. I failed more than I succeeded. I lost control. I watched love collapse. I buried talent beneath shame. But I never stopped writing, even when no one cared, even when my name faded, even when the words came slow and thick with blood. I wrote, because that's what we do. Those of us cursed with language. We speak even when no one listens. We carve our names into time. And sometimes if the words are sharp enough, the world finds them later and whispers, "He was here." Do you know what it means to vanish while standing in the center of a room? I do. It's not the silence or the absence of praise. It's the slow erosion of being seen. I spent the last years of my life surrounded by people who looked through me. I was once the voice of the roaring decade. And then I was just a man coughing blood into a typewriter ribbon no one would read. But you're listening now, aren't you? Then let me tell you the rest. The part no one glamorizes. The part after the party ends. After I died, my manuscript for the last Tycoon was left unfinished. It sat there in a drawer, pages clipped together with markings in the margins, a skeleton of something greater. My editor, Edmund Wilson, stitched it together posthumously. He meant well, but even in death, I couldn't escape the fate of being edited. They read it, they praised it, some even called it a masterpiece. That's how irony works. You die ignored, and then they call you immortal. Zelda didn't know I was gone. Not at first. By the time she understood, she was too far lost inside herself to hold on to the grief. She wandered through hospitals, sketching, dancing alone, writing fragments that made sense only to her. Her letters to me were still filled with old nicknames, half-remembered dreams, apologies that neither of us owed anymore. She died in March of 1948, in a fire that consumed the building before anyone could reach her room. They say she was asleep. I like to believe she never felt the smoke, never heard the sirens, that she simply drifted into whatever world had sheltered her for years. And now we share a grave. They buried me in Rockville, though I had never loved Maryland. It was her home, not mine. But where else should I go? I had nowhere left to belong. Not Princeton, where I never finished. Not New York, where I burned my name into the skyline and then drank it away. Not Hollywood, where I sold my soul for daily wages. So I lie beside Zelda under a shared stone. The same earth, the same silence. The epitaph reads, "So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past." A line from Gatsby. They say it was poetic, that it captured something universal. But to me, it was a confession. A quiet truth that no amount of fame or revision could erase. Because that's what I understood more than most. The past never dies. It waits. It watches. It pulls. Every man believes he can outrun it, reinvent himself, change his name, his clothes, his city, his voice. But the past is not a place, it is a gravity. And eventually we all fall back into its orbit. J. Gatsby thought he could reclaim love by reconstructing time. I thought I could reclaim greatness by outrunning my ghosts. Zelda thought she could hold on to youth by dancing in firelight. None of us made it. But that doesn't mean we failed. Failure isn't dying. It's silence, and we are not silent anymore. My books sell now by the millions. Gatsby is etched into the DNA of American literature. They teach it in high schools, analyze it in universities, adapt it into film after film. I've become a symbol, a man who captured a dream and drowned in its reflection. But symbols lie. They don't tell you about the nights I sat in darkness wondering if Scotty would remember me as anything other than a drunk. They don't tell you about the mornings when I stared at blank paper and feared that I had already written the only words worth saving. They don't tell you how often I stood at the edge of a balcony, listening to the city hum below, wondering how much gravity it would take to forget. They want the flapper stories, the martinis, the jazz. They want the glitter, not the grit. But if you're still with me now, if you've read this far, then maybe you want the truth. The truth is I wrote because I didn't know how else to live. Not for fame, not for money, but to make sense of the chaos, to bottle pain in sentences, to find music in despair. Every story was a message in a bottle thrown to the future, hoping someone would answer. And you did. You read me. You remembered me. You revived me. So let this be my final note. From wherever I rest. If you ever feel like you've missed your moment, like the world has forgotten your name, like your story has no place, write anyway, speak anyway, leave something behind, because someday someone might find it, dust it off, hold it close, and say, I know this voice, I know this ache, I know this man, and in that moment, you will live again.